Morning. You may be thinking this is the last session in our study on how to get along with each other, making relationships stick, and you may be thinking, or there may be somebody that you teach this Sunday that will be thinking as you teach, I still don't get along. They still drive me crazy. I'm still at odds. Maybe there's still conflicts in your church. Maybe there's still people in your church that don't get along with each other. And today, if you will give me your attention, I want to show you a vital principle about how to get along when getting along is difficult. Now, let me pause. That's my introduction. That's a typical way I do an introduction, and it's kind of the go-to way I'd suggest that you do an introduction. I talk about this in the book, The Effective Bible Teacher, and I talked about the idea that the promise is kind of my go-to way of doing an introduction. It has to do with the idea that I believe the Bible is written so that it may go well with you. And God is a rewarder and God is good. And if we follow him, it will be good. And so we want to show people up front. We're going to show you how, if you will follow God, life will go better for you. And as teachers, we're called upon that according to the Great Commission, we are to teach them how to obey, teach them to observe. We're not to teach them just theology. We're not to teach them to be smarter sinners. We're to teach them how to live the Christian life. And a main concept out of this passage here is how to get along when getting along is difficult. And that's kind of a little repeated phrase I would encourage you to use throughout this session. So let's dive into the text. Accept him whose faith is weak without passing judgment on the disputable matters. And just by the way, as we'll get into the text here, the person whose faith is weak turns out to be the more conservative person. It kind of bugs me, but it is what this text indicates in this particular case. Accept him whose faith is weak without passing judgment on disputable matters. And there's a lot of disputable matters. I'm going to talk about more of those in just a second, but I'll draw your attention to this, the first word, accept him. One of the things that I would invite you to do is to look at a horizontal and a vertical word study. A horizontal word study, if you can imagine a horizontal book of shelves, a shelf with a number of Bibles on it, so it's horizontally, and you can look through and see what how all those Bibles translate this particular word, accept. Now, in this particular case, you wouldn't find anything all that interesting. They'd be accept and welcome and receive, I think is 3 words, is only 3 words, and all quite similar. But I also want to show you how to do, or just invite you to look into how you can do a vertical word study. This vertical means we go deep. We go down into the underlying Greek text and we ask ourselves, how was the underlying Greek word used in this translation? Not horizontally in other translations, but in this translation, how is this Greek word used in other places where it is, how is it translated in other places where it is used? I'll show you a little graph here, and you'll notice that nearly every time this word is used, it's translated a different way. It's not completely true. A few times it's translated the same way, but it's translated in all kinds of different ways, which tells you this word has a lot of nuance, and the translators kind of struggle a little bit with it. I noticed it was interesting that in one place it's translated ate. And another place, you haven't eaten anything. We'll actually show you the verses in just a second. Acts 27:36 says, 27:36 says, they were all encouraged and they ate. They received, they accepted some food. All right, let's look at that other one. Therefore, just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. For the last 14 days, he said, shipwreck story, storm at sea. He said, you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food and haven't eaten, haven't accepted. Now, that tells you something about what this word acceptance means. All right, it's not kind of a superficial acceptance. This is to receive someone to be a part of myself. Okay, this is like to give them a big hug. I mean, really accept this person. The people on the island, Acts 28:2 says this. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and they welcomed us. And you're to welcome one another and welcome and accept and receive the person who drives you crazy. The person you can't get along with, the person that you disagree with, accept him, Paul says. One man's faith allows him to eat everything, but another man whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. And it's a little foreign to us, but the situation was, and I want you to read this with emotion. Always read the Bible with emotion. That some people, in the situation there in Rome, you had some Jews there, and they wanted to follow the kosher Jewish way of eating only certain meats, and only certain meats prepared in a certain way. And so all the blood had to be let out of the meat and so on, and couldn't eat crab crab and couldn't eat bacon and couldn't eat ham and so on, so on, so on. And you go to this butcher, and you're not sure what was in there. And then also, by the way, some of this meat may have been offered to idols. Oh, that was terrible. And, it's like participating in this idolatry. And a lot of conservative Jews just felt like, no. Let's just err on the safe side. Because, we want to err on the safe side, all right? We want to err on the side of godliness. We're serious about our faith. And so let's just not eat meat at all, because we're not sure about this meat. Let's eat only vegetables. Probably was not just a vegetarian kind of thing. It was probably these issues that I just described. And some other Christians said, do you remember the story of Cornelius? Do you remember the story where Peter saw this vision of stuff coming down, and he said, you can eat anything. You can eat bacon, you can eat pork, you can eat crab, you can eat crawfish, you can eat all this stuff. All this stuff is fair game. This stuff is great. Have you tried this stuff? Went my whole life without eating this stuff. Now I can eat it. This is great. What do you mean I shouldn't eat this? And they got very, very fired up about this. One man's faith allows him to eat everything, but another man whose faith eats only vegetables. The man who eats everything must not look down on him who does not, and the man who does not eat everything must not condemn the man who does, for God has accepted them. What are, now, the question, this was what divided them. Are your people divided over some people being vegetarians and some people? Probably not. But my question to you is, what does divide your church? What does get your church into conflict? What are some things that causes your church and you and your wife perhaps to come head to head? And as I think about that, I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. One is the issue of drinking. And I tell you, I grew up in a teetotaler home, and you could take all the alcohol I've consumed in my entire life and fit it into one shot glass. And I am just about as anti-drinking as anybody that you could find. And it's real hard for me to admit what I'm about to tell you. But the truth be told is, the Bible does not forbid drinking in small amounts. It does says, do not get drunk. And I would argue there's so much bad stuff that comes from alcohol. Why not just avoid it altogether?